Hey, Christopher. We're going to do some Pirate Street journaling here, trying to look for companies and examples in the news out there that we think might need some strategy therapy as we talk about honesty, courage, and clarity. There's an article in the journal today. It's May 3rd, 2024. It says Apple is Buffett's best investment. It's also now one of his riskiest. And, obviously Buffett has made a huge run on, I think he has almost 6% of Apple is what he's bought up over time. And, he's famously not a tech investor. This is an exception that he's made.
Was against tech investments for a long time. Didn't make one for decades. Was best friends with Bill Gates and didn't own any tech.
So, it's funny that it says Buffett got intrigued about Apple when he learned the retention rate of iPhone users was 95%. That blew his mind, because then he noticed that his grandchildren were addicted to iPhones, which we can talk about that as a whole other thing, right? And so it's not that dissimilar than Buffett's prior investment theses of why does he like Coca-Cola? It's cheap. You drink one, you got to drink another, and it's addictive. And he likes those kind of businesses. So he's in it, but it's tricky to question a Tim Cook, because there's no doubt that the business has grown dramatically, drove tons of profit. They have so much cash in the balance sheet, and the stock has done incredibly. But everybody has a run in that, Bill Gates led to Steve Ballmer, which led to Satya Nadella, right? And the question becomes, is the Tim Cook era past, because he's not really been able to launch new categories, which has been the hallmark of Apple. And some of the moves, that it's not for a lack of trying. They have the Vision Pro. But, what we are looking at is the Vision Pro. We're seeing where that's going. You have the Apple Car Titan, as you'll talk about, was a $10 billion investment that they pulled the plug on. And instead, they've announced a $180 billion buyback and an increase of the dividend, which makes the stock go up, even though 5 out of the last 6 quarters, revenue has gone down. So if you were Tim Cook's strategy therapist, what would you say, my friend?
Well, first of all, I would say congratulations, because I think any comment that we're going to make about Tim Cook or Apple's executive team or Apple overall must sit in the context of, don't be confused, one of the most legendary companies of all time. Steve Jobs is arguably a top 2, top 5, some people would say top 1 category designers. And even in the Cook era, there is one new category that has been designed that has been pretty extraordinary, and that's the Apple Watch. The smartwatch category had gone nowhere until they took over the vision for what a smartwatch could be. So that's been great. However, when the car project was canceled for $10 billion, a lot of people sort of said negative things about Apple. And at the time, we were talking about it thinking, you know what? It's not necessarily bad news, because they were innovating and they decided to pull the plug. And that sometimes happens. Right? Innovation is a fancy word for failing until you discover things that work. So I didn't necessarily think that was bad. Now, how big is this stock buyback? How many billion?
I believe it's 180 billion.
Okay. This is bad news. It's what wise people call fake growth. And in this case, it's purpose built to grow the price of the stock by taking stock out of the market, therefore decreasing supply of Apple stock, which will, if current demand stays the same or thereabouts, the price will go up. Now, there's not necessarily anything wrong with this. A lot of companies do. However, when you do this, you are sending a signal that says, and I'm going to be overly harsh here, we're out of ideas. And the thing that concerns, I think, both you and I is, if you're at the Apple board, if you're an executive on their leadership team, you say, okay, we want to spend 110 billion. Eddie, is the number?
Yeah. Sorry, I was wrong. It's 110. You're exactly right. It's led to 180, 190 up in the market cap is what.
Yes. So they've already got a high ROI on it, which from a spreadsheet lens is great. And again, there may be times where a stock buyback is appropriate. However, $110 billion, what they're really saying is, we got nothing better to do with $110 billion. And my hope after they canned the car project was that it was leading to something bigger, because you and I have posited that an EV, an electric vehicle, that's one way of looking at it. But if you tilt the category lens to a different place and you say, well, it's not an EV, it's a human assisted robot. What I thought they might be doing is that, pivoting to some kind of new robot technology. Now, maybe they are, and the 110 is not indicative of cutting back on R&D. I don't know. But here's the other thing I do know, Eddie. Right now, we are in inning one of AI, and AI is the biggest platform shift ever. It will be bigger than the internet itself. Of course, it'll ride on the internet, so the two go together. But the point being, AI is the biggest new monster mega category in tech since the internet itself. And at the time the internet was coming out in the 90s, legendary investor John Doerr used to say the internet's underhyped, and people criticized him for saying that. And the truth is, John was right. Well, I would say to you, as much as we've all heard about AI and continue to hear about AI, it's underhyped for the same reason. So what's my point? Why is Apple spending $110 billion buying back its stock when we know we're in the beginning of AI? And if I was Apple, I would want to be leading in AI and creating new categories in AI and investing in all sorts of different things up and down the AI stack. And so maybe they have a ton of cash. I get that. But $110 billion into propping up the stock versus investing in creating a different future. What say you, Eddie Yoon?
Well, I love what you were framing with the growth of an upside of AI, because I think in the strategy therapy lens, I would say you're right. Apple has been honest. Canceling Titan takes guts to throw in the towel sometimes, right? Takes guts
and
to do it.
Sort of proud of them in a weird way for doing it.
Yes. So I don't think Apple lacks anything or Cook lacks anything on the honesty part. I think they are very realistic. And part of the Steve Jobs DNA, right, is strategy is you just say no to many, many, many things, right? And that's how you create great innovation and great strategy. And I think Apple is honest about what they are good at and what they are not good at. And I think that makes them pretty conservative, which leads to courage is the area that we think they could use an extra dose of, because shareholders love Tim Cook because he says what he's going to do and he does what he's going to say. You can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs, right? So you got to actually put it out there, because what's interesting, not saying this is a good idea or what, but you know what else is $10 billion that you could buy, Christopher? You could buy Rivian for $10 billion right now.
Yeah, no kidding.
If you wanted to get back into the EV game and you thought that, as you said, this is the next iPhone platform, is a car on with automation and robotics, and that people will spend more time in their cars than they do now today. Because that's one of the primary thesis of automation or autonomous driving, is that car utilization today is like 5%, maybe 10%. We only use our cars, which is an incredibly expensive purchase, for a fraction of the day. And if EVs are going to be where people will spend more time in EVs because they can be driven around autonomously, then that share of attention that Apple has been so good of monetizing is going to shift to the car. And so they're going to need a presence there one way or the other. And so I'd argue, could you have done $100 billion buyback and save 10 to make sure you weren't lost in the sauce in the future where people are going to spend time? Maybe that's kind of one. Tesla's also saying that they're going to drop 10 billion in a year on AI, NVIDIA GPUs, as well as training modules and all the neural net innovation that they're going to do. Elon's basically pushed all of his chips into that. Now Apple has a much bigger chip stack. Not saying that they should have spent, we're going to drop $100 billion onto AI. But, you tell me, Christopher, if he had said, we're going to earmark $100 billion as a war chest to dominate AI versus it's $110 billion stock buyback, which makes the stock go up higher.
Well, exactly. And I'm just checking as we're talking. Most people, so another thing about strategy therapy and kind of most people, their strategy is what you could think of course, as inside out. What technology do we want to build? What market categories do we want to play in? And if you think about the languaging, people talk about going to market. That's self-centered. We are going to the market. people talk about product market fit. Product is our thing that we're going to then go do to the market. As opposed to the strategy therapy lens, which is start with the customer problem, start with perceived new potential that we have to design new market categories and drive new creation of growth, and work back from customer problems and solve them in new and different ways. All right, so when you think about it that way, you also open the aperture to look at adjacencies and competitors. Well, Microsoft has been very busy. Microsoft, in the last handful of weeks alone, has announced a $1.5 billion AI investment in the UAE. Microsoft has just announced an investment in Malaysia, $2.2 billion in Malaysia, and many other places. They have a huge development investment in Israel. And so, interestingly enough, in whether you want to talk about Dubai in the UAE or Malaysia or Singapore or Indonesia, here's another one: Microsoft to invest $1.7 billion in Indonesia's cloud AI services. So they're building out massive capability in AI in the cloud around the world, kind of quietly. No one's paying much attention, and best I can tell, having been involved with some of these deals in the past, when you do deals in countries like some of these countries, the governments there provide tremendous incentives for you to do so for very obvious reasons. I just look at this strategically. If we think about the chessboard, right? Microsoft is strategically placing AI bets all around the world. Obviously, they're the major contributor to, and they own a huge percentage. I think they own as much as 40+% of OpenAI. And they continue to invest radical amounts of their own. Now, we know Apple's investing in AI, but to your point, had they announced yesterday, just imagine a $50 billion AI internal R&D fund, and taken half of that, 60, taken half of that money and put it into R&D for the future. What happens to their stock today versus a buyback?
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And
Wow.
you and I are Apple shareholders. And as an Apple shareholder, I want Apple investing in creating different futures, not propping up their stock.
100% agree. It's funny because I think 110 is almost more than double what the previous buybacks have been. So I really wish they had just kept the pace, as 40, $50 billion buyback. Great. That's part of the playbook. No problem. But as you said, earmark the rest of it for, we're either going to acqui-hire, we're going to buy, we're going to develop and turn. However we're going to get there, if Tim Cook took a stand and say, we are not losing the AI opportunity here. We have the greatest installed base of iPhone, phones in the world. We have the greatest installed, like billions of people in their installed base. Incredible loyalty and lifetime value. And yet, I wish they had done a little bit of the Domino's playbook when they had said, yeah, our pizza's bad. Hey, Siri, really bad. Siri just talking to me. She heard me calling her out on my phone here. She said, that's not nice. She just said, sorry, Siri. But, it's one of these like...
Don't hurt Siri's feelings. Yeah, Siri's very sensitive.
She's still listening. I got to turn her off, right? But I just wish they would come out and say that and acknowledge, we messed this up. We should have been way out. We were way ahead early on this, and that we've fallen behind,
Well, and the other thing that's amazing is, again, this doesn't get reported very much. Apple has done a legendary job in building their own chips for quite some time now. Well, what's going on in the chip world? You don't have to be a rocket surgeon to understand there's a race to build GPUs, led by the category designing NVIDIA, who have done as legendary a job as has ever been done in creating a new category of core infrastructure, in this case around the GPU. And there's right now infinite demand for GPUs because, of course, AI takes up massive compute. Well, Apple stopped relying on external chips years ago and has become quite the chip company themselves. And they are investing in their own GPU capability. Of course they are. They have been for a while. However, you don't have to be a rocket surgeon to know there are going to be massive breakthroughs in GPU technology and the kind of related infrastructure stack for AI in the cloud. And some people think the cloud is this thing that floats around in the air. It's not. The cloud equal data centers. That's what the cloud is. Physical data centers, air-conditioned rooms with hard drives and servers and lots of wires and carboningulators. And massive compute. And the other one, of course, is massive energy requirements. And so now there's a connection between solar and other energy sources and the future of AI and the cloud. And so all of that is to say, there's any number of areas where Apple could be innovating technology and new category design right now. And maybe they are. But why give so much money to the stock when, I don't know, if you threw $50 billion at some smart people and said, come up with the next generation GPU or come up with the next generation of AI or any number of adjacencies, I think that would be a much more powerful use of the money than giving it to shareholders.
Yeah. So I think we're in agreement. The worldwide conference for developers is in June. So we're going to find out pretty quickly if there's a there or not. And I think, we give kudos to Tim Cook and Apple for being, as you said, one of the greatest executives of all time, one of the greatest companies of all time.
No question.
Since Jobs' death.
And we're rooting for them. We want them to do well.
Yes, 100%.
Apple now is core infrastructure for American society and society beyond. The world needs a strong Apple right now.
And we give them credit. They've been honest about, hey, can't compete in EVs. We're pulling out. We're honest about. I think they launched Vision Pro well enough, saying, hey, it's early stages. We're still but here's the category it's not all the way there. So I think they've done a nice job of like canceling things that they decided on the chessboard they couldn't win, moving forward with things, but trying to manage expectations around it. Tim Cook is teasing a big AI thing, but if Apple is true to form, they're not always first. Rio was the first MP3, but they were oftentimes right and different in what they do. And so when I look at Sora and all the video, like they should not lose the AI video creation game, given the quality of the cameras in the iPhone and everything that, with Movie Maker and all that kind of stuff. They should not lose the creator economy on all of that stuff for that. And so Apple is in the catbird seat when it comes to AI, the creator economy, and all the stuff that people talk about of Chat GPT. It's fun to play around with, but it's a different thing if you can actually use it to generate a movie script in a week, generate movie-like quality in a week. That's Apple's domain. And if they lose that, then it's a telltale sign, but we are rooting for them. And we'll find out what the chessboard actually looks like in a month or so.
To be continued.